The first half of the 2000s had been rough on Blizzard Entertainment. A series of major resignations and projects that went nowhere seemed to signal the end of the Juggernaut's reign. But all that changed in November 2004 with the release of World of Warcraft, a massively multiplayer online game that became more popular than anything anyone had ever seen before. Over the years, it grew to 12 million paying subscribers, one of the single largest revenue streams the industry had ever seen. In theory, this windfall should have allowed Blizzard to do whatever they wanted. Yet the popularity of the game had caught them off guard, and the company had scrambled to grow so it could both support Warcraft and work on other projects. They had plenty of unfinished games in the works, and once again, anything that didn't have Warcraft in the title met with massive delays and huge problems. The question was whether or not Blizzard could cope with its own success. Even as World of Warcraft was defying belief, Blizzard's other projects were floundering. Up at Blizzard North, Diablo 3 just couldn't get off the ground. Despite being the next game in the incredibly popular series, the sequel hadn't evolved with the times. The team just couldn't find a way to make the game fun. Worse, the graphics looked pretty dated by 2005, and the Blizzard North team had lost their leaders in a mass resignation in 2003. The project was in a free fall with no way out. In the end, Blizzard's executives in their southern base in Irvine, California, made a hard decision. They wanted to keep a tighter watch over their creative teams, and they couldn't do that from half a state away. So in August 2005, they shuttered Blizzard North. Their northern cousins were all given the option of moving down to Irvine to continue to work with Blizzard on Diablo. Some accepted the offer, and some didn't. But either way, it was a blow to a team that had become used to their own culture and creative independence. And it was one that Diablo 3 couldn't survive. With the closure of Blizzard North came the scrapping of the game they'd been working on. Diablo was restarted from square one. In typical Blizzard fashion, the game wasn't spoken of again for years. But 2005 also had some happy news for the company. October saw the world's first BlizzCon, a massive fan convention hosted by Blizzard itself. It allowed attendees to try out early builds of the first Warcraft expansion and StarCraft Ghost, their still-in-development console action game. It also allowed fans to meet up with their heroes who made the games they loved. The convention was a huge success, and while there was none in 2006, since 2007, BlizzCon has become an annual event. It has grown tremendously in size, and not coincidentally, Blizzard has not attended an E3 since 2009. They don't need to reach out to their community anymore. It comes to them.
Yeah, and then the other opportunity that we have nowadays is an event like BlizzCon where we can actually show projects that might be even pre-alpha to the fans and give them an opportunity to experience it, but also give us an opportunity to take feedback from a very fresh set of eyes, because you only get one chance to take feedback from a first impression.
But despite it showing at that first BlizzCon, StarCraft Ghost was in for another setback. The Xbox 360 released in November 2005, and Blizzard knew that the PlayStation 3 and Wii would be releasing shortly afterwards. Their philosophy of delaying a game until it was perfect worked great on PCs, but had run into an unexpected consequence on consoles: a generation gap. StarCraft Ghost was still in production for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and original Xbox, which meant, suddenly, Blizzard had spent all that time and money on a last-gen title that wasn't even close to being done yet. By March 2006, the jig was up. Blizzard announced that the game was indefinitely postponed. It's still postponed today, but is effectively canceled. No one is working on the game anymore. The various team members were long ago assigned to either the Warcraft or Diablo teams. None of this stopped Warcraft's meteoric rise to dominance. In May 2006, Blizzard proudly announced that they had partnered with Hollywood movie studio Legendary Pictures to make a feature-length Warcraft film. Shortly thereafter, it was announced that Spider-Man director Sam Raimi had signed on to the project. And then, in typical Blizzard fashion, it went silent for a while. And now, nothing is known about it. Go figure. The years went by with a lot of Warcraft and not much else. But 2008 saw a huge change for the company, because major publisher Activision merged with Vivendi Games. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, In 1994, the young upstart Blizzard had been acquired by Davidson & Associates, which was later bought out by CUC International, which merged with HFS Corporation to become Senate, but after Senate was found guilty of accounting fraud, it sold off its entertainment division to French company Havas, which that same year was bought by Vivendi, which then, in December 2007, announced it would be merging with publishing juggernaut Activision in return for a majority holding in the ensuing company. Got all that? In July 2008, the deed was done. The newly formed super company was now the biggest in the game industry in sheer revenue. But this new joint venture, one half Activision and one half Vivendi, was not called Activision Vivendi. No, it was called Activision Blizzard. Blizzard had insisted on having their name in the top billing. In fact, they wanted the company to be called Blizzard Activision. In the end, Blizzard compromised and allowed the biggest single force in all of gaming to put their name first. That is how far Blizzard has risen. Blizzard has unprecedented autonomy within this joint venture, effectively managing itself as an independent studio that just informs Activision of its plans. To date, Activision has allowed this to go on. The smash success of Warcraft has kept them happy. Where the partnership will go in the future, only time will tell. With that independence, Blizzard has continued their philosophy of taking their time to get their games right. Even after the Ghost fiasco, the highly anticipated StarCraft 2 and Diablo 3 stayed under wraps for years.
I would say that even though we have these really popular franchises in Warcraft, StarCraft, and Diablo, if you look at our track record over the last 10 years or so, really you could make the argument that we've just been the Warcraft company. But the thing is that these franchises are so important to us and so important to our fans that it's really important that we deliver game experiences to our fans in the context of those universes. And honestly, I think we've been a little lax with it over the last 10 years, and our focus has been heavily on the Warcraft universe. So it's a really difficult balance to strike between, serving all three of these franchises and, the challenge of supporting World of Warcraft, which has been an immense undertaking for us in the last 6 or 7 years.
But finally, in July 2010, 12 entire years after the first StarCraft 2 released. It came with a huge non-linear campaign structure, a sweeping story told through cinematic cutscenes, and an adventure subgame, a revamped BattleNet service, deep support for the modding community, and of course, the world-famous multiplayer. 12 years is beyond an eternity in the gaming world, but between the unbelievably long-lived original and Blizzard's reputation, StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty went on to sell 1 million units in its first day and 3 million in its first month. Compared to Warcraft, those numbers were so-so. Compared to anybody else, those numbers were amazing. But despite being released, StarCraft 2 isn't finished yet. The original StarCraft broke up the story into 3 different campaigns, one for the human race and one for each alien race. For StarCraft 2, Blizzard is splitting up the story into 3 entirely separate games. The game out now, Wings of Liberty, only tells the human part. StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm is expected sometime in 2012, and after that, players will get to conclude the narrative in StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. How these games will differ from each other and what new features they will have to entice customers remains to be seen. In addition to these games, the future also holds the long-awaited Diablo 3. The game is close to completion now after a number of stops and restarts. The story takes place 20 years after the events of Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, allowing it to be both a follow-up for old fans and a new beginning for new ones. The overall gameplay and style will adhere closely to the older games, with a top-down view of a powerful hero mowing down legions of enemies with his awesome gear. The art direction, however, has moved closer to Blizzard's other games after multiple iterations. Blizzard has also stated that recent action titles such as God of War have convinced the team to make the title more visceral, bringing the action back into action RPG. At the same time, they have stated that they want a heavier emphasis on character and story, bringing the RPG back into action RPG. It is expected in late 2011 or 2012. These are the only games that Blizzard was ready to announce to the world. But then, on November 30th, 2010, an internal document with a tentative release schedule leaked onto the internet. It made mention of games that no one had ever heard of before, including something with the working title Titan, scheduled for 2013. Reportedly, sensitive financial data was also included in the leak. Immediately afterwards, Blizzard's general manager in China was fired, and this is largely seen as confirmation that the leak is genuine. Indeed, Titan has now been confirmed by Blizzard as an active project. This will make it the first game from Blizzard that doesn't have Warcraft, StarCraft, or Diablo in the title since 1995.
We have started work on an unannounced MMO that we have said is not a sequel to World of Warcraft. It's something new and fresh, and we're trying to basically leverage all of our experience, all the lessons that we've learned over the past 6 years of running World of Warcraft, and come up with something fresh and new that pushes the MMO genre.
Beyond what was revealed in the leak, there are further rumors that Blizzard has yet another team working on yet another franchise. If so, then after nearly 10 years of nothing but Warcraft, Blizzard is starting to push its own boundaries once again. For certain, they have one team on Warcraft, one on StarCraft, one on Diablo, and one on Titan, and the possibility exists of another on the new game. If all goes according to plan, they will release multiple games across different franchises in the coming years, so that Blizzard becomes a company famous for a variety of games once again.
Hell, it's about time.
Lots of college graduates are ambitious, but even by that standard, the three guys who thought that they could make a successful entertainment company with no experience were just plain nuts. But starting with the first American-made game for the Super Nintendo, to reinventing the strategy genre, to inventing the action RPG, to redefining the upper boundaries of success, Blizzard Entertainment stands today as one of the most powerful forces in media. They have both complete independence and the backing of the biggest company in the industry. Their games are both respected critically and popular commercially. They've had their fair share of low moments and failed projects, and indeed their output over the last decade was largely swallowed by their MMO juggernaut. But with multiple teams rolling now, StarCraft 2 finally out, and more on the way, plus the upcoming Diablo 3 and Titan, Blizzard is in a stronger position now than they've ever been. They look like they've reached the very top. But any time that's ever been said of them before, they somehow find a way to climb even higher.
They came from different places, different worlds, but they all came with the same purpose: to fight.